Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all feeling very content and well-fed and watered. I know I'm feeling very festively plump right now. So hopefully to liven you all up a bit, we have Peter Mayhew-Smith from South Thames College Group speaking on his experience of college mergers.
Yes, you do. Sorry. Sorry about that. I was just waving at colleagues from South Thames Colleges Group there. That's really embarrassing. Anyway, isn't this lovely? It's really festive. You look amazing. It feels like I've walked into a Christmas party rather than a proper conference. But I will do my best to make the story of mergers as festive as possible. But there's quite a big gap to fill there, I'm afraid to say. So I'm going to tell it to you straight. I can't do anything else because I've got lots of people, wonderful people from our group who know what the truth is, and they can ask the questions that expose my lies and PR. So I won't do that. I'm going to give it to you pretty straight. So thank you very much for asking me today. It's lovely to be here, and I'm astonished to be the keynote speaker, it says in the literature. But that's all good, and we will make a really good fist of this, I assure you. So here we are. Oops, no, that's a good start. Let's go that way. So what I've done here is I've just gone back through history and I've dug up all of the presentation files that I used when we were going through the process of merger. So what I've done is edited down, decks worth of different material to synthesize together the stuff we said pre-merger, what it was we thought we were going into, and then wound forward a year and a half and said, what was it actually like? How has this really gone? And what lies ahead? And out of all of that, I'm hoping to dig up from you some lessons and some really useful experiences to teach us what not to do, what to do more of, and what to do the same next time round, assuming there is ever a next time. So this was the slide that I opened a great many presentations to governors with, going back in time to 2016 when we first started this conversation. I was principal at Kingston and also Carshalton College, looking after both of them as a federation in those days, and then looking to merge with South Thames College up in Wandsworth and Merton. So we went through that, and there was a really distinct process where we drew all of that together. And so there's the logo. We put a lot of time into the branding and the logos, and the governors argued this one out. So I've made that slide transition, if you note, from that to this. Really, it's really quite important. Although it probably looks like nothing at all, it means a lot. Because one of the things we did is we decided to reinvent Merton College. It had been embedded in South Thames College as the outcome of a previous merger. But actually we wanted to say, as one of the principles for our merger, was that we felt our roots in our local communities. In each of the 4 London boroughs that we serve, we needed to be very clear with the local people that we were there in each of those boroughs doing our duty for those different sets of people who wanted us to deliver greater prosperity and a chance to the students who came to us. So we said that's a matter of principle, not just a bit of fancy branding. Doing that properly and expressing our sense of mission to our local communities was very, very important. So we went for that, and that was what we consulted on when we went out to the whole formal process there and got some really positive feedback to say, yes, you've captured that correctly. You need to stay local. You need to do what you've done for, 150 years in some cases. We've been there doing this job in those communities, and we just need to stick with it because that's what they need from us. So that's what we said. And that's the geography. I love this slide, actually, because it expresses the geographical integrity of our proposition. You can see our 4 boroughs like a cake slice running up into the close to the centre of London and right out to the edges of North Surrey and things like that. So We felt there was a really strong case for organising our merger on that basis. And we argued this through many, many times. There are lots of more geographically outlandish solutions that have come through, but we felt this had a real integrity to it, and we stuck with that one. This was what we were saying when we started out. So we wanted to start from a set of principles. We didn't want to say, this is a crisis. You can hear the ambulance sirens rushing around the South Circular. This is much more about doing something of enduring value that met the expectations of all of our stakeholders and all of our partners, and we were not going to behave like headless chickens in a crisis. We were going to treat this as an act of principle and a moral duty to make sure we made something better out of the back end of this really difficult process, the local area review. So this is what we said. We went through a set of vision and values. We said that we had a vision for where it was we thought we ought to be, and we spelt out what those values were. We said that trust and respect across the different colleges, they were all in very different positions, but it didn't matter. We were zero-basing the whole thing, starting again and saying, just trust, we've got to trust each other and respect each other for the job we're all trying to do here. We needed a sustainable future. Well, that would be a very pleasant achievement if we could get there. We wanted to be better able to respond to growth and the opportunities that there are around us. There are some of those, but we wanted to be able to use those better. We wanted to invest. We've got to use our money wisely and develop a more responsive organisation. We wanted to be the go-to place for skills, as we expressed it. But we also wanted to be champions of social justice. So we wanted to retain our very strong emphasis on localness, on the people that come to our colleges. Students with learning difficulties needed to have as strong, if not a stronger place in our organisation. Many of you will be ESOL practitioners, and that's at the heart of the work that we do at the South Thames Colleges Group, because many people in this part of London are non-native speakers, and to access the opportunities that their families need, they need to learn English and then progress into further learning beyond that. And we needed to sustain those elements of our curriculum quite deliberately and not lose sight of the things that people had created us to do. So a bit of context. This is going back 2 or 3 years. Area-based reviews, everybody heard of those? No, that's not a mystery. I can explain them if you're really curious at the end, but there's not really a lot to say. The financial pressures are really tough. And I will say this, although there are growth opportunities, my explanation to governors now at almost every turn is to say, we are managing a sector that is in gentle decline. There is not a golden pot at the end of any rainbow, if you can see a rainbow. We have to be realistic about the nature and the state and the environment that our sector is working in. So to promise yourself new funding, extra growth, more students, is you've got to be on really sure ground before you start banking those kinds of figures. So one of our little reminders to ourselves has been to say, you can't measure hope. It won't pay any bills. You've got to be really clear and really firm and very sure about the things that are real and the stuff that you're just telling yourself in order to make yourself feel better, because there's a very, very big difference. And we've seen many colleges fall into that trap of believing their own hype. And we weren't going to do that. So we wanted to say very clearly, this is about managing decline. The decline will stop at some point, but it hasn't stopped yet. Or does somebody want to say otherwise? Do you think we're in decline? I think that's a truth that, for me, is once you've got there, it's like losing your hair or something. You face up to it and you have to deal with the truth about that and the reality. you build it into your culture and your habits and your behavior. You look for the growth, but you don't depend on it because it's not always there to have. So we needed to grow our reputation to satisfy our local authorities and our partners. The GLA is a very strong strategic player in London, obviously, the mayor, and they're devolving a very large part of our budget to the Greater London Authority to buy provision from us. And we've got to make sure that we're satisfying their expectations and we can influence them. We want to be that strategic partner, find the opportunities, but also, do you remember the Salisbury report was just out at this point? We needed to embrace that and bring in some of the new ideas that were breaking for us. So technical education, the skills plan, Sainsbury report, all that wonderful apprenticeship levy money that was going to pour in as those changes just started to edge through. Well, that didn't really happen, did it? So we're still waiting on that one. But there were, and there still are, things to be done, growth to find, opportunities to develop, places to take our organisation, and that ongoing service to the 25,000 students that come to study at our group of colleges every year has to persist. We're guardians of that, and we've got to make sure it's there for the long term. So we also went on to say these things, that the merger is a means, not an end. You're trying to achieve something durable and different and positive, and merger is just one route through to getting that off the ground. So remember what it is you're looking for beyond the process, because the process is all-consuming, but you've got to remember why you're doing it, in my opinion. It should deliver growth if you can find it. We should be looking for excellence. This has got to be done to a high standard. I was talking to Phil at lunchtime, just before we were coming in. The expectations on our sector are up here. Make no mistake about that. We are being looked to deliver a much more resilient and successful sector than we are at the moment, so that we have to prove that our excellence, our value, at a great many turns. We have to be able to innovate to achieve all of that. We have to find the efficiencies. One of the things that's difficult to justify, this was part of our merger discussion, how many, and I love HR directors, but how many HR directors does South West London's FE sector need? Does it need 4, or can it work with 1? And there are your value calculations. Where can we get that efficiency going? We need to make sure that we're relevant, that employers and other partners see the utility of our organisations, and we've got to have the resilience so that we're not on the brink of falling over. I discovered actually just the other day that we are about the 10th or 12th biggest FE college in the country now, which really caught me out. I didn't realise we'd got to that sort of level. And that means there's a duty on me to make sure that we don't capture any headlines whatsoever except for very, very positive reasons in the weeks and months ahead and the years ahead of us. Because actually, we've got to prove, we've got to reform from the inside as a sector and prove that we can deliver that resilience, because Whitehall are not convinced. We've got to show that we are excellent and that we will do our fundamental duty without fail, year in, year out. And we've got to be a lead on social justice. We have got to underpin all the work we do with a really broad, open access offer to all the people that want to make good use of our organisation. So not much to do there. There's just a little list of things that we thought we'd try to achieve as we set out. Oh yes, and we had to collaborate. You can't work on this scale when you're pretty much the only college for miles without collaborating. You've got to be at other people's disposal. And I just went into a bit more detail. I said, this is not about just a quick fix. We're not here just to try and just get ourselves over the next 18 months and hope for the best and imagine it's all going to turn out fine. That's not what this is going to look like. And I took our governors back to a point in history when Queen Victoria was still on the throne. in the 1890s when 2 of our 4 colleges were founded. And I said, what do you think those governors sat in this room talking about then? What did they say? Did they say we just need something for the next year or 2 just to get us over the hill? Or did they say, this is forever? We're building an institution that's going to change the lives of a vast number of people over centuries. That was how they approached it, and I felt that for us, as governors of this emerging institution, we had to think in those terms. How are we going to be remembered in 100 years' time? And we also need to look beyond the next 18 months, as I said there. We've got to define the next generation of FE institutions. So we've got to find a new format for our colleges to thrive and operate, and not just focus on fixing the problems of the last generation. So I know that, I think, Colin, you talked to me about future-proofing, and that's absolutely right. I don't quite know what the future is at the moment, but actually an awful lot of the merger process, as I joked with you the other day, Colin, I said we're almost history-proofing our organisations because we're dealing with a series of different types of failure in getting mergers through and making them turn things for the better. And we also had to create the headroom to invest because actually it's so hand-to-mouth running a college that you want to get to a point where you can start to put the money into the things that really matter. Your buildings, your lovely staff, your learning resources. We have to change the dynamic, and it means creating enough headroom for us to be able to do these things in our budgets. Otherwise, we're in this spiral of just managing the next month or the next year. And I'm sick of it, to be frank. Sorry, it gets better. And I said, these are the other things that I said at the time, because also our governors were really at loggerheads. There was a real sense of different cultures and different approaches. So we had to bring the governors together, and we said, we have to be clear about what's absolutely critical, what's central to the job here. Know what you're looking at, and don't get distracted by all the other stuff in this enormous process and this enormous organisation, because that sense of vertigo as you look across an organisation of this scale can really make you quite dizzy, and you reach out for the wrong handles to hold you up. So we said there's two critical things, student outcomes, and we've got to deal with the finances. And if you deviate from those 2 priorities, it's a real issue. But they are complex things. They're fundamentally complex human activities, all piling up and building and building and building to 2 numbers that I always say as a principal I carry on my shoulder. So the one number, how big is our financial surplus? How big is our financial surplus? Is it enough? Is it going to give us enough to do the things we need to do? But most important of all, what are our student outcomes like? Do students thrive here and get the benefit for the future that they need? And to me, once you can get to that, and you can say that these 2 things are the 2 vanishing points through which you see your organisation, then you're able to get through a process as turbulent and complex and confusing as merger. And this was a little exercise I did, so I'm not going to make you do this. I just want to show you some of the things I was dealing with our governing body. So just a little insight into a training thing I did. So I got our governors to sit on their tables, all from the different colleges, and say, right, what I want you to do is to pick a tune. What's a tune that captures us as a merged organisation? So I suggested, there were some things that I put up, some favourite songs of mine from the 80s. Anybody remember some of these? Which I thought was, that was quite poignant. That one, which we'll all remember very fondly. And of course that one. So I said, actually, none of those are any good. You can't possibly use those to help bond a culture together. But there's a truth underlying those, that you are all coming, you as governors, they were all coming from different perspectives, different backgrounds, very different beliefs about their colleges, very critical of the other college, and very proud of the college they were in. So I said, actually, anybody know who that is? Reverend Al Green? Wonderful, wonderful musician. So I said, that's, I think, the right thing for us to choose as a piece of music. Governors came up with all sorts of other things. I can't remember what they were, but it didn't matter. It meant that they were going through the process. There was a little footnote that I put on there to say, not that we actually have much choice now that we're merged, given the constraints of our articles and instruments, but that's not so very catchy. But you get the point, is that you've actually got to connect the humanity up as well as all of the big financial and legal and commercial and property-based things to make this a real human experience, because the human dynamics are also critical in the midst of all of this. I don't know whether it worked or not, but I'll have to go back and ask the governors whether they feel that they do want to stay together. And then what actually happened? Well, here we go. We went into, so this was the budget that we started off with. I just thought I'd show you some numbers, because actually numbers tell you the whole story. So we started out, we set a really optimistic budget. There's our lovely £71 million worth of income, and this is really our surplus. So any accountants in the room will know what EBITDA is. It stands for earnings before interest, taxation, depreciation and amortization. So in case you're interested, it's basically the financial health measure applied to colleges by the ESFA now. And then it all went wrong. We overspent on, we got there on staffing actually, beg your pardon. Our expenditure stayed fairly level, but the income, again, we promised ourselves income that was never going to come in. We were optimistic, and we really ran close to the wire in managing our budget last year, and we had to make a very significant restructure, which was really hard. It was one of the most difficult things that I've ever had to do, but the reality is that we needed to make sure we had the solvency, that we could remain stable and constant as an employer. But you can see then that we removed about £3 million worth of staff from the organisation. A really difficult thing to do. But we've improved our EBITDA to a position that we think is sustainable for this year. And so far, so good. The budget's holding. So lesson learned, don't be over-optimistic. Know the reality and build in some contingency. In terms of numbers, this is one of those things that absolutely gobsmacked me. So it's just to show you the complexity and scale of what we're up to. So this is the totality of our recruitment across all our different funding streams, all the different things that we did this is from last year. So you've got huge numbers of different types of student coming through. Nearly getting on for 6,000 young people, 13,000 adults. That's amazing. And a total there of actually 29,000 people. This is head count. Those people choosing to come and study in our college. That's humbling, and that's a privilege to serve all of those people. So getting it right 29,000 times over is a big job, and we needed to build the structures and the management that could deliver on that. And that's been a real priority for us, is getting the right balance of staffing, management and organisation together to make sure that everybody got a good deal when they came to study with us. We also this was a lovely slide actually to share with governors just a few weeks ago. So, because we said, you've got to stay with this. You can't get distracted. Stay with the quality. Curriculum leaders needed to be absolutely on it in terms of making sure that we didn't miss a heartbeat in terms of serving our students. So we've started out, you can see real wave of different achievement rates, some very poor numbers in some of the colleges prior to merger. And we used this as a lever, really, to say, this has got to get better. You can't go on like this. You've all got to rise to a common standard as you progress. And so we saw that gap that we were sitting on here close significantly. We saw a 6-point rise in our overall achievement rates as a group, and now we're proud to say that we're coming up above national average. Not a long way above, but actually we're getting somewhere with that. And underneath all of that, there's some lovely stories of people, of teams, of people really moving things forward, taking pride in those basic fundamental activities of the organisation and stepping it up to a level where actually you've had a lot of colleagues say, this is great, really pleased to do this better and to believe in our teams and our students in this way. Further to go, there's loads more to do, and that doesn't tell the whole story by any means, but actually this is our duty, and we are proud to do that, and we're doing it reasonably well there. And how does it feel now? So I'm probably the last person to ask how this actually all looks like. So my dear colleagues at the back there are probably better to talk to give you a sense of what it's like for them on the ground in the reality of a merged college. You all know, some of you have been parts of mergers, I understand. So just let's see, anybody here been through? Yeah, okay. So you know what it's like. You're feeling the reality of that at the moment. I'll just say what I believe to be the case, and you can challenge or explore this with me as we take it forward. But these are the things that I think are true. It does feel enormous. It feels like a very different type of institution. I think we are on the scale of a university now, if you want to put it in that way. So it's a transition from one level or one type of entity, one scale of entity, to one that it just feels baffling and vast and fascinating when you start to look at it. But it is enormous. Governing body, they did get a lot out of that musical game that we played all those months ago, and they are coming together. Just before I came up here, we had a real debate about how we're going to play some of our estate strategy. So I'm going to give you an example here. We've identified really clearly that we've got far too much building over all of our estate across southwest London. We have acres of building, and we don't need it all. There are not enough students to come in and fill those empty classrooms. We have classrooms that are used once a week. And we did the maths, and it told us that we use our classrooms about a third of the time each week. So a third of the available time classrooms are used. So you take 3 classrooms. Of those 3 classrooms, 2 are probably not necessary. And for every empty classroom, we spend probably about the equivalent of a teacher's salary. So an empty, unused classroom costs about £40,000 a year to heat, to light, to insure, to maintain, to keep secure, to clean. All of those things, about £60 a square metre. And therefore, it's incumbent on us to take a good hard look at our buildings. And so our governors and us as managers have had to push ourselves to a point where we say there just isn't enough market out there for us to justify the 70-odd thousand square metres of buildings that we occupy at the moment. We have got to get out of those and use the proceeds from them to invest in our poorer buildings. And just to illustrate what that looks like in practice, we had South Thames legacy governors voting in a meeting this morning to say, yes, we will sell down parts of the South Thames College estate to invest in the very poor buildings at Kingston. So the altruism, the sacrifice from one part of the organisation to support the aspirations of the other, are starting to come through in governance terms. One bit is able to give to the other where it's needed. And that, to me, is a really powerful symbol of a governing body that's got the totality of the challenge, isn't sat in silos, resenting one another secretly, but making positive noises up front. That's important. That's important. And that will make a difference to the students coming to study in our tatty old tower block at Kingston. There are still divergent cultures. There are very different attitudes to money. There are very different attitudes to all sorts of different things. Lots of people giving me all the reasons why they can't do X, Y, or Z. But me knowing that if we don't do X, Y, and Z there, we have to do double X, Y, and Z over here. So that sense of risk-taking, of people saying, no, I can't change this, I can't make efficiencies, can create risk. Created a lot of risk last year with people not used to managing resources right down to the detail. We've had to build that up as an exercise within the group. We do have strong ambition. We want to be a really great partner to our students and our employers and to our local authorities and the GLA and beyond all of that. So we intend to be an organisation that people depend on and love and see the value in. So there is a sense of ambition, a sense of drive, and I hope I'm not being unrealistic in expressing it that way. There are deep local roots, but that creates tensions because there are places where we're saying we've got two colleges that are 2.3 miles apart. They're almost walking distance with each other. And before we merged, they were offering pretty much mirror images of each other's curriculum and wondering why they were both experiencing small group sizes, low efficiency, and an inability to invest in their buildings. So they were both taking market share off each other. And in the end, we had to say, actually, that can't go on. You can't do that. That's crazy. Let's move provision across the two college sites, bring them together, and create something that is more sustainable and more recognisable. But that meant taking various types of provision out of one borough and putting them over in another. So you can imagine that creates some real, I don't know about that. Can you really do that? Should you be taking motor vehicle out of Merton and only doing motor vehicle in Sutton, for example? And that's a really good question for me. And the local authority are quite entitled to ask it when they've got vulnerable young people, young men in need of programs like that in order for them to have a hope of making their way forward in life. But we've seen that through, and that's been a positive. That's given us a much more efficient and rational curriculum offer there. Financial strain is significant. That's not going away. It doesn't seem to be getting any easier. There's no pot of gold that I've found. We are pushing workloads up. People are having to do more. But that's the reality. We can only afford the number of staff that we've currently got. And that means we're asking a lot of our colleagues. And I really do feel for that. That's a tough ask. And bringing our systems together. Even though we actually had the same systems, the different colleges used them very differently. So we've all used EBS. You've heard of EBS, I'm sure, some of you. But actually they were used to do very different tasks, seen as very different facilities in the different organisations. And so getting the same usage out of them, the same sense of purpose out of our MIS, for example, has actually been quite a challenge. And we're working through that at the moment. Needs more training. And that's another lesson there, is we've got to make sure that we train and explain. Don't assume things, because actually they are different. People have just grown up in different families, and we need to help show that they can be different. And so we look ahead over the edge of the next cliff and look forward to what's coming around the corner. So we're putting together a new strategy. Just going to sign that off, I hope, at governing body on Tuesday next week. But what I've done with this is to say is to go back to those Victorians who designed our college system all those years ago and say, well, what would they expect of us? What would they, if they were sat in this room as governors of this organisation now, what's the point of our colleges existing? And it shouldn't have changed, I don't think. We still have to deliver good learning, good progress for our students, and that social advantage, the prosperity that all those families who come to us each year expect us to improve for them. And that's a simple job, and I wanted to take it back to some real fundamentals so that we weren't promising ourselves the moon on a stick, but actually saying, we have got a job to do for generations ahead, and we're going to be here to do that really well and set our sights simply on delivering that for our communities. Which means, very simply, some fundamentals, even better outcomes for our students, better finances, rationalising our estate, and better well-being for our staff and students. Because the next speaker is going to talk, I think, a bit about mental health, and this is a really big topic for us. We have got to do a better job in our sector and among our student body in promoting well-being and making sure that we're supporting one another with all the love and care that's due to everybody in the further education sector, merger or not. That's that.
Thank you.
Okay. What do we do now?